Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome to my first video of the Spring 2018 season. And what better way to kick it off than with a series that I have been anticipating for months at this point. This is Megalo Box, and no joke, it is the only series in my time of doing YouTube that I have felt so compelled to make a video on just from the PV. No joke, you can go look at that video right now, a 5-minute video on how goddamn hype that PV was. The music, action, style, just everything about it looked so on point. So the question at this point is, did it live up to my expectations? Did it meet that high bar that I set for it months ahead of time? Well, the short answer is yes. In every way I could have hoped for and more. This is easily the best first episode I've seen all season, and if it maintains this quality seen in this first episode, we're looking at a very promising anime of the season contender. This is the kind of series that just makes me giddy even being able to talk about it. So before we get into what made this episode so special, let's just cover this synopsis for the uninitiated. For people who don't know, unlike my episode reviews, I try to keep my first impressions on series relatively spoiler-free, so someone can watch this video and still be able to jump into the episode and check it out if it interests them. Thankfully, there's not too much to spoil in this episode, as a lot of it was build-up, so that makes my job easier, but still, I will be discussing certain scenes in depth a little bit, so if that bothers you, I would just absolutely recommend checking out the episode first and then coming back to this video if you want to hear my thoughts on it. Megalo Box stars our main character Junk Dog, who is participating in fixed boxing matches under who seems to be a friend or a mentor of sorts named Nanbu. JD and Nanbu have been taking part in these fixed boxing matches for a while now in order to earn quick cash, but JD has become sick and tired of the life that he's living and wants to aim bigger. He wants to prove his strength to both everyone else and himself. Now, this story might seem pretty standard. In fact, anyone who's a fan of the movie Redline will immediately notice the blatant plot point connections between that film and this. Where Megalo Box shines, however, is its execution of this premise and how well realized these characters are in such a short amount of time. What really lends itself to these characters is the writing, and the biggest compliment I can give the writing is how every scene they throw at you, every line spoken, it all feels like it has a purpose. There is a reason for that line being said, and one of my favorite examples of this is early on in the episode when JD is talking to his mechanic. He's resolved himself to finally fight seriously in the ring for once, and tells the mechanic to bet on him that match. Of course, later on we see that he's been roped into taking the fall again despite his wishes, and has another scene with his mechanic afterwards, apologizing for how the match turned out. The mechanic, who assumedly bet on JD and lost, interrupts him during his apology and uses the situation to reflect on his life. He says that his wife always said that even though he was a good man, due to him being too trusting, he would end up dirt poor someday. But in spite of that, he wants the part of himself that had faith to be right. He wants to believe no matter what. That's just the kind of person he is. And what's beautiful about this line is how well it parallels JD's personality that we've seen throughout the episode. And I was already impressed with how well such a minuscule line from JD earlier in the episode turned into such an important theme connecting to his character later on. But the episode took it one step further in the final scene where JD and Yuri are facing each other. And JD reflects on not only what the mechanic believed in, but what Nanbu said earlier in the episode, that his skills are the real deal, and that despite taking part in all of these fixed boxing matches, he wants to believe. He wants to believe that the faith that he has in himself is real. Meaningful dialogue delivered in nuanced ways is littered throughout the episode, and it's what made not only every scene of this premiere engaging, but also what connected me to JD's character so quickly. Of course, if we're going to talk about this episode, it would be downright sinful not to mention its incredible soundtrack. Just from the PVs, anyone who wasn't expecting absolute greatness from the OST had another thing coming. From what I gather, composer Mabanua is actually an established hip-hop artist, and I think it's his experience here that lends itself to this OST not only being so exceptional, but so different from any OSTs I've heard recently. It's going for a very electronic feel, and something that fits right in line with the cyberpunk setting of this first episode. One particular scene involving a standoff in the rain gave me chills almost exclusively because of the music that was playing. If this first episode is anything to go off of, we are looking at a clear soundtrack of the season contender, if not flat out winner. Of course, what will immediately jump out to many with this premiere will likely be its aesthetic and style. And that's understandable considering it's what immediately jumped out to me from the PVs. TMS is going for an intentionally retro style, and little details like the end card titled "Not Dead Yet," it just truly gives this feel of a modernized series from the 90s. And it's this, along with the stellar direction as a whole, that distinguishes Megalo Box from its peers. And I guess this is as good a time as any to also confirm that the production values as a whole are indeed as high as they appeared from the PVs. Gorgeous backgrounds, excellent shot composition, beautiful color palettes, and just generally detailed animation all add to the presentation. The only thing left to really talk about is the story, and there's not much to say as there is a lot left to explore in where this plot is going and where these characters are going. But what I really appreciated about the approach to its storytelling this episode is how, despite being an episode dedicated to establishing our main characters and the overarching conflict and goal, they did a really good job of keeping it interesting and fun throughout. It never felt like a build-up episode, we were just tossed into the lives of these people. This can also be attributed to the excellent writing I mentioned earlier, never becoming too overwhelming where you couldn't keep up with characters' motivations or inner feelings, and dialogue that was always delivered in a way that felt natural, and not just, here's my character in a drawn-out expository mess. I'm also really digging what appears to be the main antagonist, Yuri. He's got a wicked design and definitely has a presence whenever he speaks, which is just always a good thing in terms of building up an antagonist, and I am just so looking forward to the rivalry that is about to begin between him and JD. Another thing that I love that they set up in this first episode is establishing our final destination, what I assume to be the finale of this series, right now in this first episode. Too many series will leave what we're actually doing in this story so vague for the vast majority of the series, so we as a viewer don't have a grasp on what we're aiming for. But here, right from the start, we learn about this high skill level megalo boxing event named Megalonia. We don't know the context behind it or why it's being held, but we do know that it's where the best players in the world are going to gather, 4 of which are going to duke it out for the title of the best megalo boxer in the world. I have to give appreciation to that because not enough series build their stories around the idea of letting us know where we're headed. Another thing I'm really interested in terms of this story is the world. They're definitely going for a kind of dystopian future environment here, but we don't necessarily know what this world is and what things are like out there. And while I don't necessarily think this is the kind of series that needs that world building, they're clearly going for a more character-focused story here. I still would love to have that world building sprinkled in the background, while of course going through the story of JD, which, if this episode is any indication, I think they'll be doing a good job of that, because while there wasn't necessarily a world building focus this episode, it did a good job of fleshing out the environment, its inhabitants, and the way that they live in a very natural and engaging way, coupled with following JD. So I'm excited, I can't wait to learn more about this story and this world. And one thing I should mention before we end this off is that I know this is an Ashita no Joe 50th anniversary spinoff. I'm not familiar with Ashita no Joe as a series, but this is standalone, so I don't really have to be. But I am curious what any Ashita no Joe fans out there thought of this episode, if it met their expectations, etc, etc. Overall, I was absolutely blown away by this first episode. Just everything I could possibly want out of this I got and then some. I can only pray that they continue delivering this level of quality throughout, because if they do, we'll be looking at not only an anime of the season contender, but potentially even anime of the year. Thank you guys for watching this video. As usual, I hope you guys check out the first episode and let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments down below. And as always, have a great day.